The 80s had the General. The 90s had John Gilligan. In the noughties, it was the reign of Martin Marlowe Hyland. His was a familiar path with success and power, and then the recklessness. He had to go, because with him, an innocent young man doing an honest day's work died. Crime World presents Caught in the Crossfire, the unsolved murders of coke kingpin Marlowe Hyland and innocent Anthony Campbell. Available now on all podcast platforms. Clodagh, we're in a sauna here. We'll just have to excuse ourselves. And of course, I'm helpfully wearing a jumper. The podcast studio was like...
it was like stepping off an airplane. Yeah, roasting in here for some reason.
People will have to excuse us if we're looking slightly shiny today. Anyway, we are here to talk about Raymond Shorten. He was due to be sentenced today, but that has been put off until later in the month.
Yes, so he was, like you said, the sentencing was due to happen today. It has now been moved to 3 weeks' time. So the 22nd of July, he'll be sentenced for his crimes. He was convicted of rape, two separate women, two separate incidents. Both were in 2022, but one was in June and one was in August. He was in court today.
And he went to trial for this. He pleaded not guilty, and it was a jury that found him guilty. He didn't plead on these charges at all. All the evidence had to be heard, and both the victims had to stand up in court and
tell the judge what had happened to them. Yes, these young women. Very bravely wrote victim impact statements. They were delivered to the court by the prosecutor. You know, these are young women that were in their early 20s when this happened and still are. And they detailed the profound impact that what had happened to them has had on their lives. In the first instance, this young woman was on a night out with friends. She was extremely intoxicated, she was going home. She seemed to live in the city centre, just from the information that was given, because she was able to walk home. So she kind of walked up through town. She made it to her front door.
Right.
This girl made it home to the safety of her front door, and Raymond Shorten picked her up. Next of all, she wakes up, she had been passing in and out of consciousness. She woke up to him on top of her in his car. She was kind of in a reclined position. He had pulled back the seat. And hearing the details of what he did to that young one today was just appalling, just disgusting. This young woman, explained that she had never had sexual intercourse with somebody before. This was the first time. She had been menstruating, so was wearing a tampon. He anally raped her, vaginally raped her, and then dumped her off back at her house. She goes home. The next morning she's in work and she tells one of her colleagues that she's feeling really nauseous because she has to take a morning after pill, having been raped the night before.
So he
horrific.
Basically must have seen her staggering along the road. She gets as far as almost her front door, or perhaps at it, and does she remember how she ends up in the taxi? Or
no, he had said that, it was consensual and he'd picked her up. And actually in both cases he had claimed that what happened between both victims was consensual. Had said that he was so flattered. He had said that they had called him cute and was so flattered that such young women would be interested in him, which was what he was, his defence. But she said that she just woke up in the car. She doesn't remember getting in. And there was CCTV as well of him picking her up outside her house. He said that she flagged him down. She didn't. There's this very clear evidence of him preying on this young woman. There was DNA, obviously. That day she went and she had a forensic examination at the hospital, and the DNA evidence was collected and it was matched to him when he was arrested. In the other instance, he had driven the girl home. What happened to this young one, this young girl, was just, both are extremely horrific. But when you hear the details of the brazenness of what he did afterwards, which we'll talk about, but he basically picked her up, brought her home in a taxi, raped her in the car, her phone had died, so she couldn't pay the fare. It was €70. He sends her into the house to get her phone charger so she can charge up her phone to pay. She brings the charger back out to the car. For some reason, the phone just didn't charge. And he sent her into her house where she had to get money from her parents to pay for her taxi home after he had, I mean, not to say that.
I know we spoke about this over there. That did jump out at me when I was, when he was initially convicted of these crimes, and we did a podcast about him. The idea that he'd send her in to her parents to get paid for that taxi journey that he'd raped her on makes it all the more sinister. Is it part of what? Like,
there's no fear that by doing that, you would assume he's feeling no fear in that she's going to go in and tell her parents and they're going to come out and, confront him or take his details or anything like that. Extremely brazen behaviour.
Now, what did the women say, what effects this has had on them through their victim impact statements?
The young women both said, it really knocked their confidence, their trust in people, particularly in men, anxiety in taxis, not being able to go out with friends. One of them gave a lengthier statement, and she had said that she was shocking that it had even happened to her in the first place, but a predator like him not just raped her, but also had done this to somebody else. She spoke about how they both have intimacy problems. One of them spoke at length about her kind of counselling process and how she's been going to counselling to try and deal with what happens. She said she was feeling extreme anxiety before and after the sessions because, you're going to this session for an hour, and she knew she was going to have to kind of go back into that trauma of what had happened to her and talk about it. And she had spoken particularly about how, it was a huge breach of trust that, she did everything she was told to do. You're told to get in a taxi. A taxi is safe. They'll bring you home. But she had done all the right things, and she was still attacked by somebody who was trusted by, people to be brought home safely. That's one thing you're told. Oh, be careful. Be careful for fake Ubers or fake cars. But the reality is, you can get into a real taxi, and this will happen to you.
Like the brazenness of him and the kind of the aspects of what he does after it, dropping the first girl back to the door that he picked her up at. He's not afraid of being seen. He's not afraid of cameras. He's not afraid of any consequences. You have to kind of wonder, is there other victims out there of this guy? He's a father of 5. He was obviously, living a lifestyle as if he was just an ordinary father out working to support his family. We know that the family aren't supporting him because his daughter made comments to say that around Father's Day that, they were never going to have anything to do with him again. The court was told that he has been convicted in relation to other serious sexual offences. We can't go into the details of those, but this guy's working for years and years and years as a taxi. It's just hard to imagine that they are the only 2 incidents that he does that and feels so safe to get away.
And confident in himself that he's going to get away with it as well. Obviously, there's been a huge conversation not only in the media, but I would assume, I know myself, with friends and stuff like that around safety issues at night. And I know you spoke about this as well when you did the episode with Niall, about how, as a young woman, you just can't go on a night out, and how you have different self-awareness as a woman than you do as a man. And it's not something every man can understand unless you've been in that position. And I feel like that's really hard. I mean, sometimes you get in a taxi and they can be very friendly, and kind of, it's almost like, especially if you're a woman on your own at night going home in a taxi, which often I've done, and they will kind of be very careful to let you know subtly that they're not a threat, because you do every time, you get into a car on your own with a drink on you, or walking on your own after dark, whatever. There's always those fears.
And I suppose as you get older, maybe you get a bit more sense. I think I have a little bit more than I had when I was younger. But when I was younger, and these girls are only very young, and they're out and, they're drinking and they're getting absolutely sometimes blasted. And, you know, they're talking about staggering on the street, trying to get home, etc., etc. They become separated from their friends. You always say to young people, stick together, make sure you get a taxi together, whatever. Anyway, plenty of times it happens that they're separated. But this is a guy who's actually out there watching for that. You know, the evidence to the court has been that he has gone out of his way to pick up these women. And that also there was evidence that he was going in and out of nightclubs and, you know, as if he was stalking, looking for his women who were getting drunk and maybe getting separated from their friends.
Yeah, and vulnerable.
So it just seems really hard to imagine that these are the only two victims.
It is hard to imagine. I mean, he's been a taxi driver for a long time, so it seems like you would, I mean, of course, if anyone who's listening wants to get in touch, they absolutely can. As you know yourself, of the amount of cases that end up in a prosecution and then end up in court and then end up with an actual conviction, you know, it kind of gets slimmer and slimmer and slimmer. So the amount of cases that there could be people out there that have had similar instances or got away from an incident or, you know, did try and get it further and it just didn't go further. I wouldn't be surprised.
Sure, I've no doubt. He is a very, very sinister character. What was he like and who was in court, by the way?
Court, apart from the legal team, there was some, I believe, probably family members of either the victims. I'm not 100% sure because, you know, the court was held in camera to protect the identity of the victims. Of course, he was allowed to be named because he was convicted. But other than them really and the media, there was nobody there.
He's in custody, I presume.
He's in custody. He's been in custody since 2022. So from the second rape, he's been in custody since then.
He's been brought in by the prison officers.
Yeah, so he's been brought in and out. You know, the defence, when they were kind of had theirs, you know, so obviously the prosecution, they have the victim impact statements, they hear evidence of the arrest and all that sort of summary of the case basically from the Gardaí. And then they will have the victim impact statements. But then it's the defence's turn to kind of give any mitigating factors or anything like that. And oftentimes this is where we get character references and stuff like that. There was none in this instance. The defence, his solicitor did say that he has lost relationships with his parents, his kids, his wife, his marriage is no longer. Now, I know his daughter said that they don't want anything to do with him, but he said he hopes to rekindle his relationships with his children.
He said that?
Yes. He's also been working in the prison 7 days a week in the prison laundry. That was kind of the extent of the information given about him. But his demeanour in court was the look of a man who felt very sorry for himself that he had been caught. I mean, listening back to the details of what he did, it was so graphic and just like...
And how did he react when those victim impact statements were being read out and when all that evidence is given?
I think he was more upset when the evidence was being read out. But so, you know, the defence will ask the arresting Gardaí or whoever it was reported at the time. So it's true that he, you know, was arrested this date, just to confirm dates and stuff like that. And, you know, the evidence from the sexual assault kits was kind of read out as well, and a little bit of the statements that the women gave at trial, just to really summarise it again. And he kind of was upset during that, but kind of...
And how so? Like, was he actually...
I think he kind of visually looked flustered, and he has this chronic frown, I would say. He looks like his that's just the way his mouth rests, chronically sad looking. But 2 years in prison probably would do that to you. But he didn't seem like he was reacting much to the victim impact statements, to what those girls were going through. It seemed like he was more upset for himself that he had to listen to what he did.
And of course, he pleaded not guilty, so he doesn't agree at all that any of this happened.
No, he's saying it was consensual. He did try and say that he was flattered by the attention of these young women who were getting into the car and kissing him at that age. I mean, it is very brazen. And I suppose we see this a lot. A lot of times when these cases come to court, that is their defence, that it was consensual. And
yeah. Right. Well, look, he is going to be sentenced later in the month.
3 weeks' time. So
3 weeks' time.
Be down for that.
And obviously then if anybody else is, you know, wants to come forward or wants to get in contact, they should also, if they are considering contacting us, they should probably contact the Gardaí as well.
Absolutely.
Crisis Centre and all the other areas that are open for them. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.